sector. You're just sitting there. I'm saying, no, you do make an effort, but you do it with a bit of exertion, with some difficulty, trying to understand with us, sitting down and focusing. But on the other hand, is there any pleasure after you gain some knowledge, the knowledge you're searching for? Isn't that an experience in itself?
Honestly, I personally think that, the listener might be surprised if I told them that I have almost abandoned reading. I don't really read anymore. I might read 1 or 2 books a month. In the past, I used to finish a book every day or two. Ever since I became acquainted with the Qur'an, I haven't felt the same pull toward other books, because this book amazes me. I find a beautiful, unique idea, but then when I think about it and try to develop it, I realize it's missing something specific. Then I discover in another place something that completes what was missing, and I am amazed by the sense of completeness I find in the Quranic text. I've never found this in any other book in my entire life. So now, it's not that I want to give up reading, but the reality is that the Qur'an astonishes you with how vast it is. It grows with you. Whenever I start learning a new field, after a year or two, I get bored because the ideas just repeat themselves. There's nothing new, maybe just an idea here or there.
It's the same idea, just repeated.
Except for the Qur'an. The Qur'an is the opposite. It leaves you feeling helpless. Every time I think, that's it, I've mastered this idea, then I discover that it opens up a whole new perspective. There is no God but Allah. This never ends. Every time I make progress, I discover that I'm still at the very beginning of the journey. I thought I had reached the depths of the Quranic ocean, but I find out I'm still standing on the shore. This sense of awe has made me see my whole life as just a fleeting moment. I ask myself, what should I focus on? What should I work on? For example, the political model in the Quran took me 10 years. 10 years. And even now, I haven't finished. After that, I thought about moving on to the economic model in the Quran. Then an idea in the Quran caught my attention, that the Quran only mentions humans in a critical way. It always criticizes humans, always reproaches them. I didn't understand this at all. Why is it that humans are always criticized in the Quran? But when I delved deeper, I discovered that there is a complete educational model within the Quranic text. So I left the economic model and started working on the educational model. The Quranic model, which we are supposed to talk about now, I don't know when we will actually discuss it though. The point is, if the doors of the Quran open up to you, and they do open for anyone who knocks on them, but you have to be persistent, you must be patient with the Quran. It's not reasonable for you to be patient with Nietzsche and Hegel and with Francisco Chiama and John Stuart Mill for years. And some of us read Al-Shatibi, for example, for years and specialize in it for years. But when it comes to any passage from the Quran, we don't want to be patient for even a few minutes. No, this can't be the case. And I always tell you, it's just my human nature. I say the Quran only talks about this idea a little in this topic, and then I discover that it expands and expands and expands and expands. Sometimes I plan for it to be just a tweet, but then it grows and becomes an article, then it turns into a book, and eventually I can't keep up with it. I give up. The idea has grown too big. I'll mention a small example. Once I wanted to focus on a specific topic in the Quran related to the political field. It was a particular aspect of politics, but I wanted to read the entire Quran to understand its perspective on this specific point. So I boarded the plane. I told myself I'm traveling for just 5 days, 4 days really, just for this idea. I want to dedicate my mind completely to this idea. So as soon as I got on the plane, I opened the Quran, wanting to start from Al-Baqarah. I thought Al-Fatiha doesn't have anything related, so let me start directly from Al-Baqarah. So I said to myself, come on, man. I read Al-Fatiha for its blessings. The whole trip ended up being just with Al-Fatiha. Honestly, I couldn't move past it. I returned to Qatar, and for 6 months I was in Qatar. I never moved on from Al-Fatiha until I finally surrendered to it. When I finished with it, I discovered why it is called the opening, and realized, why is there no conclusion to Al-Fatiha? There is an opening, but no ending. I discovered why. And we have certainly given you the 7 oft-repeated verses and the great Qur'an. I used to wonder, how is Al-Fatiha the 7 oft-repeated verses? And Al-Fatiha is part of the Qur'an, yet he says the 7 oft-repeated verses and the great Qur'an, as if they are 2 different things. But when you understand Al-Fatiha, you understand. Why is there this conjunction? Your mind gets puzzled by this matter. The point is, we need to change our perceptions toward the Qur'an. If we change them, we will discover something, and the truly deprived is the one who is deprived of the Qur'an. Unfortunately, we have a tradition, especially among those in Islamic law, the professors of Sharia, that the Qur'an should be left for the end of your life. First, delve into the principles of jurisprudence, the science of hadith, the terminology of hadith, the rules of jurisprudence, the objectives of Sharia, and immerse yourself in the branches of language and the branches of rhetoric as well. Go into semantics and rhetoric, delve into philology, morphology, and etymology, and study all the branches of Quranic sciences. Then, at the end of your life, go reflect on the Qur'an. Sometimes you might grasp it, and sometimes you might die before that happens. Who convinced the Islamic mind that the Qur'an should come at the very last moment, instead of us being raised on Quranic remembrances? We have come to approach it only at the final moment, the moment of farewell, just before we leave this life. We turn to the Qur'an then. How can we embody the Qur'an in our reality? Did not Allah Almighty command us to read the Qur'an so that we may establish our lives upon it? Did He not command us to read the Qur'an so that we may build our social lives and human society upon the principles of justice? How is it that we only turn to it at the last moment? So we are making a big mistake, and even in Sharia colleges, generally throughout the Islamic world, this has become the case. You find that when you discuss Quranic verses with professors of Sharia, they tell you, I'm not a specialist in the Qur'an. Go to the professors of tafsir, Quranic exegesis. How? He tells you, I'm a specialist in hadith, I'm a specialist in usul al-fiqh, I'm a specialist in fiqh, but I'm not a specialist in the Qur'an. Strange, how can you be a scholar of Sharia and not be a specialist in the Qur'an? The Qur'an is the source of Sharia, as al-Shatibi says. Then we put you on a path of the matter, so follow it. The life of the Qur'an. How can you be a professor of Sharia when you haven't reflected on the Qur'an and you don't know the foundational terms of the Qur'an? The foundational Qur'an? Is that even conceivable? I mean, it's not a problem for you to be a specialist in hadith or a specialist in usul al-fiqh or in fiqh, but only after you have specialized in the Qur'an. That's why, ideally, in all Sharia colleges throughout the Islamic world or in Islamic universities, the first year should be a foundational year focused on the Qur'an. You see how in foundational Western universities, the first year is dedicated to foundational studies? No, for us, the first year should be Quranic foundation. Aren't we Islamic universities? Aren't we Sharia colleges? So we must start from the foundation of Sharia, which is the Qur'an. In this year, you learn the foundational vocabulary of the Qur'an. The Qur'an has foundational terms, a network of vocabulary that you must learn. You learn the structure of the Qur'an, its unity, and its main themes that tie it together. You learn about the parallels in the Qur'an, its clear and ambiguous verses, the major context of the Qur'an, the fundamental Quranic ideas, and the Qur'an's stance towards others. This foundational Quranic education should last for a year or two, and then you can move on to other fields of knowledge. If it were up to me, there would be a comprehensive Quranic curriculum for all university students, where everyone would learn the foundations of Quranic concepts across all branches of human and social knowledge. That way, when someone moves on to specialize in sociology, education, economics, or political science, they would have a Quranic foundation that they could draw upon in their field of knowledge, guiding and directing them in their study of human and social subjects. But what we've done is isolate the Qur'an. When it was time to benefit from it, meaning we planted it, but when it was time to harvest its fruits, we went to another tree. We did not continue with the Quranic tree.
I would like to get into the topic of education because you just mentioned the subject of Al-Fatiha, and that raised a question for me. When you talk about Al-Fatiha, it seems like you see it in a different way. We recite Al-Fatiha daily, multiple times in every prayer. So perhaps we should try to reflect on Al-Fatiha or read it in a way that might evoke certain meanings for us, helping us with devotion and in various other aspects. So I don't want to move on to the topic of education without at least understanding the method of reflecting on Al-Fatiha in particular.
Look, the general idea is to follow what the Qur'an says. What did the Qur'an command us to do? It commanded us to reflect. Reflection is not the Qur'an itself. Reflection is contemplating things, and contemplation has a key to it is the question, why? You ask, why? And see how things open up for you. When you approach the Qur'an, don't just pass over the verses. Take Al-Fatiha, for example. How does it begin? What did Allah the Almighty start with? Praise be to Allah, Lord of the worlds. Why? Why did He say praise be to Allah and not thanks be to Allah? What is the difference between praise and thanks? Ask this question. Why did He begin with praise? Investigate how the Qur'an uses the word praise and how it uses thanks in the Qur'an. You will see the difference between the two usages. You will notice that praise is only used after an action. For example, praise be to Allah who guided us to this. Praise be to Allah who fulfilled His promise. Praise be to Allah who created the heavens, and so on. Praise be to Allah who... It always comes after an action. Notice this. So here you understand. What is the action mentioned in Al-Fatiha that calls for praise? Here, you start to engage your mind and reflect, praise be to Allah, Lord of the worlds. Why did He say Lord of the worlds and not God of the worlds? What is the difference between Lord and God? Look and examine the uses of Lord and the uses of God in the Quran. The idea of thoroughly studying Quranic vocabulary is extremely important, and Al-Raghib al-Asfahani relied heavily on this. You can refer to Al-Raghib al-Asfahani. He is one of the geniuses of Islamic history. Al-Raghib al-Asfahani in his explanation of meanings. The Quran is in many cases very precise in its definitions of vocabulary because it relies on complete and thorough induction. So go through the Quran and see how Lord is used and how God is used, and you will arrive at the difference, and then you can go back. Sometimes, even for you as an interpreter, the difference might not be clear, so you look at what the commentators have said to benefit from their insights, but you should start first. Try it yourself so that you maintain a direct connection with the Quran. Do not let your direct connection with the Quran be severed. And observe. Why? He said, Lord of the worlds, not Lord of the people. The difference? Why? Master of the day of judgment. What's the relevance? Why is nothing in Al-Fatiha attributed to God? The entire surah is the human saying, Praise be to Allah, Lord of the worlds, the merciful, the compassionate, Master of the day of judgment. You alone we worship and seek help. Guide us to the straight path, the path of those you blessed, not those who earned wrath or went astray. It's the only surah entirely attributed to the human. Why? When you ask why, things open up. Why does Allah say, O you who believe, O people, O you who disbelieve, but never, O you who submitted? Ask why. Then search for the answers. But if you never ask why, how will new horizons open up for you? Because why is the question of contemplation. In order to reflect on something, I must ask about its reason, its cause. Why was it set up this way? We believe that Allah, the Almighty, revealed the Qur'an, and it is a precise book, a book whose verses have been perfected. Therefore, every word, every letter was placed intentionally, and we must seek out the purpose. If you train yourself to ask why and then search through the rest of the Quran using thorough induction, you will develop noble qualities. This is a simple method that anyone can use. Any Muslim can apply it, at least to create a sense of connection with the Quran, and then develop themselves further through the writings of scholars and by reading the sciences of the Quran and what the scholars have mentioned. Scholars, in general, have established well-known Islamic research methodologies, but at the very least, there must be a direct connection. You read the Quran daily, but you don't feel a connection with it because you don't search within it. You are just reading it superficially. But you don't explore its meanings. This is the problem. The Quran is made easy for remembrance. Just try to engage with the Quran, raise your questions, and then see how those questions lead you to very profound answers. And even if you don't find an answer, ask the scholars. Let them also work with you on these Quranic ideas. This is how you expand the Quranic foundation. When I talk about this matter, I don't aspire to make everyone a scholar, no, but I want to broaden the Quranic base within the Islamic community. But to distance you completely from the Quran, that is not right. You will remain isolated and become someone who abandons the Quran, and as a result, your knowledge of the Quran will not develop. But develop yourself, learn and ask, learn and ask, learn and ask. Over time, you will accumulate knowledge about the Quran and you will develop a strong connection with it. As a result, it will not be easy for anyone to manipulate your understanding of the Quran. Not everyone who comes to you and presents a certain idea should sway you this way or that. This is an easy and straightforward method. Anyone can learn it.
Therefore, breaking the psychological barrier is possible for anyone sitting here. What holds us back is that I hope there will be a direct connection between us and the Quran. Just try to read, ask about it.
You will feel a great sense of enjoyment. For example, when you reflect on Surah Ad-Duha, just take a piece of paper and write down the ideas that come to you as you read Surah Ad-Duha. Just look at how it is arranged, how it is organized in an amazing way. Look. As for the favor of your Lord, mention it. This is the last verse. People, for example, think that the favor of your Lord means everything, meaning everything you have, like wealth. And this is something people show off, because this is a way of speaking about blessings. But search for what is truly the blessing of Allah. Exalted is He. Look at the Qur'an's beginning. By the night when it covers, your Lord hasn't forsaken or detested you. He will give to you until you're satisfied. Where does Allah speak of giving? Indeed, we gave you Al-Kawthar. Connect these verses, they interlink amazingly. Just ask, but take Surah Al-Hujurat, for example, and write down the thoughts that come to you today before you go to sleep. Or take Surah Al-Furqan. You'll find that every day your thoughts accumulate. You read it and maybe write 2 pages, then another time you write 4 pages, and so on. It expands. Then if you find an idea, search for it in other places. How is it expressed? You'll find it was expressed in different ways in a manner that is complementary. It's not repetition. There is no repetition, but rather it is complementary. There is repetition sometimes for the sake of emphasis, but in general, Quranic ideas are complementary, but not in just one place. Something is mentioned in Al-Furqan, something else in Al-Hujurat, something in Abasa, something in Ad-Duha, and so on. The Quranic idea is complementary. For example, let's look at al-mutaffifin when you read, woe to those who give less. Who are the mutaffifin? Who is a mutaffif? A mutaffif, as the verse explains, those who, when they take a measure from people, take in full, but when they give by measure or weight to others, they cause loss. If he has a right, he makes you beg for it, but if the right is upon him, he doesn't fulfill it, you see. He is strict about his own rights and careless about the rights of others. Who is the opposite of the mutafif? When you think about it, you might say the oppressor, but no. The oppressor is the opposite of the just. The oppressor denies others their rights. No, you will find in the same surah the meaning that is opposite to the mutafif. So if the mutafif is the one who takes all his rights but does not fulfill the rights of others, then God mentioned to us the righteous, indeed the record of the righteous, for two actions. Who is the righteous person? The righteous person is the one who fulfills the rights of others and is forgiving when it comes to his own rights. If you have a right over me, I will give you your right in full, 100%. If you do not give me my right in full, I might overlook it and forgive you. That is why Allah, the Almighty, how did He describe Himself? He is the most righteous, the most merciful. Why did Allah, the Almighty, describe Himself as righteous? Because Allah gives us our rights in full. Every good deed you have done, you will find it with Allah, the Almighty. Nothing will be withheld from you, and whoever does good, it will not be denied him. Everything will come back to you. But if you fall short in fulfilling Allah's rights, He overlooks and forgives. That is why He is righteous. And that's why when we talk about dutifulness to parents, why did He say bir al-walidain, righteousness to parents, and not justice to parents?
Give them their rights in full without...
But if He denies you your rights or falls short, you overlook and forgive. My relationship with my father is not one of justice, but of righteousness. If he falls short, I don't approach it from the perspective of, well, he didn't fulfill my rights. Why should I obey in this case? No, you're not dealing with just any friend here. This is your father. The region deals with the parent differently than with the parents. Here you see how the verses are interconnected. You are talking about the righteous. Suddenly you want to talk about the merciful righteousness. In another image, suddenly you want to talk about honoring parents. The Qur'an is interconnected in a wondrous way. Strange. I mean, that's why the idea, those who say the Qur'an is not from God, then from whom is it? It's impossible for a book to come with such a precise, coherent, and perfectly integrated structure, with all its parts calling to each other in this way.
How can we understand the Quranic stance on upbringing? You've mentioned several times that we would get to this topic, and I'd like to dive into it now. The Qur'an's stance on upbringing, how can we understand it?
Look, the Qur'an took a remarkable approach when it comes to human upbringing. It did not start by directly instructing the human being. No, it dedicated a number of verses solely to explaining what human nature is, what the nature of the human soul is. So it started first with the concept so you can understand. Sometimes I used to wonder, what is the benefit of some verses that are merely descriptive? The Qur'an is supposed to be a book of guidance, so you would expect it to contain verses that instruct us to do or not do certain things. But no, it includes many verses just to explain what the nature of the human soul is. Look at John Dewey, the American educational philosopher. He was the center of educational philosophy in the 20th century. He said that every philosophy must fundamentally begin with an understanding of the nature of the human soul. This is exactly what the Qur'an did. For example, no. Indeed, man transgresses when he sees himself self-sufficient. Notice it doesn't judge, it simply explains to you. It explains the nature of the human soul, telling you that when a person starts to perceive, it's not when he actually becomes self-sufficient, but when he starts to imagine that he is self-sufficient. You see, this is an indicator that soon he will transgress and overstep his limits. That's the nature.
Humans.
It's human nature. Just as soon as you see signs of self-sufficiency, be absolutely certain that he is on the verge of transgression, whether on a political level or an educational one. For example, someone might be given the position of department head, and then you start to notice why. He begins to criticize his manager recklessly, and soon after, he starts flexing his authority by firing employees. That's it, it's clear. Even if it's just in his slip of the tongue, he starts to show that he feels self-sufficient in this matter, and that he only achieved it because of his own knowledge. End of story. Here, the signs of transgression begin to appear, and from this verse we derive the theory of the overreaching arm and try to interpret it. The phenomenon of Hemeti in Sudan, the Wagner phenomenon in Russia, and the Janissary phenomenon in the Ottoman Empire. How did these entities emerge? Then, when those in charge of them saw their own power, they developed a sense of self-sufficiency, which led to transgression. And if we add to that the idea of rulers amassing more and more, the model of accumulation combined with the model of self-sufficiency gives you a theory for understanding the concept of the overreaching arm. And by overreaching arm, I mean the military arms that are established outside traditional military institutions, with the aim of securing power against the influence of the conventional military establishment. Just like what al-Bashir did when Hemeti emerged, and like what the Ottoman Empire did with the Janissaries, and so on. You find indicators of self-sufficiency. For example, when he rose to power, the signs of self-sufficiency were clear. He was a cook, and suddenly he started criticizing the Minister of Defense. Signs of self-sufficiency appeared early, after 2014, when he entered Ukraine and expanded into Africa and South America. Clear indicators of self-sufficiency started to emerge. This is like explaining the Qur'an. This is descriptive knowledge, for example. Man was created anxious. See, this gives you knowledge. It doesn't tell you whether it's right or wrong.
It gives you a fact.
Man was created anxious, fretful in hardship and stingy in ease. This is human nature, and the Qur'an explains it perfectly. The Qur'an's diagnosis did not start by treating the human soul. It began first by diagnosing the human soul. And this is the difference. That's why all the descriptive verses should be viewed as a diagnosis of the human soul. And this is the problem with the modern educational system. It is not based on a correct understanding of the nature of the human soul. That is, our schools, educational system, and universities do not concern themselves with teachers understanding the nature of the human soul so that they can deal with students and children in a sound manner. That is, you cannot create sound education unless you first form a correct understanding of the human soul. Right or not? Therefore, unless we start from this correct understanding, we will not achieve sound education.
There are scientific studies at universities that research this scientifically, American and British universities.
This is part of understanding the human being. All of these are attempts to understand human nature. But when we approach education, we bring in teachers and tell them, you must say this to the students. You must say this or that, right? But we don't sit with the teachers and explain to them the nature of the human soul so they can understand it and therefore deal with it properly, right? When you say that man was created anxious, you need to explain to me what anxious means. The Qur'an mentions about 15 negative traits of humans: anxious, fretful, withholding, hasty, miserly, despairing, unjust, ignorant, argumentative, exultant, boastful, arrogant, and so on, and others. All these traits are for the purpose of diagnosis. They diagnose the human soul. These traits are not necessarily all apparent, but they all exist within you. There is no person who does not possess these traits, but some of us have 3 or 4 of them, and some have 5 or 6. 7 traits may be apparent, and the rest are all there. They are hidden within you. They exist, but they are not visible or active. When do they become active? When you interact with an environment that triggers other negative traits in you. For example, suppose I have 4 of these traits. But for instance, I do not have the trait of being argumentative. Let's assume that. The argumentative person is the one who argues falsely. You know you're wrong, but you still defend yourself, right? Isn't that your nature?
You argue.
Even in trivial matters. He knows the truth, but he keeps arguing just so he doesn't get embarrassed in front of the guys and in front of people, so he ends up coming across as argumentative. And mankind is the most argumentative of creatures. He always has to argue and defend himself. For example, I wasn't stingy. But when I mixed with an environment of stingy people, little by little I picked up the trait of stinginess. It's true, I became tight-fisted. So, Faisal, you have some negative traits, I have some negative traits, and so has some negative traits too. And in this way, we feed each other negative traits without even realizing it. The Qur'an did not mention man in a blameworthy sense because what is meant by man is the person characterized by these traits. And when Allah Almighty said, and man was created weak, why? Why is man weak? Because he possesses these negative traits and these make you weak. When do you become strong? When you move from the model of man to the model of faith. When you become a believing person, that's when things change and you acquire different qualities. That's why Allah Almighty always says, except those who believe, except those who pray. This is another stage. Therefore, the project of upbringing in the Qur'an is to move a person from being characterized by these negative traits to another model. And that is the model of the believing person who is characterized by the opposites of these traits. Did you see the traits I mentioned to you a little while ago? The Qur'an mentioned their opposites, which is the model of the believing person.
So we need to be aware of these traits.
Your educational project in the school is supposed to be from the very first day. When you enter school, the educational project should begin by purifying the human soul in the student from these 15 traits, one by one. And for each one, the Qur'an mentioned its psychological motives and its challenges. And it mentioned the behavioral manifestations of each of these negative traits and described their characteristics so you can learn and recognize them. Then, it mentioned the opposing positive trait and the challenges that prevent you from attaining it. The transition from this negative trait to that positive trait is all there. The diagnosis and the remedy we need are present in the Qur'an. What is needed to embody this educational model only in schools? If you purified me from these negative traits, my brother, And not just these negative traits, even if you only instilled in me one of these 15 traits, the trait of gratitude. Imagine raising a student with the trait of gratitude from the very beginning. Do you know what gratitude means? Gratitude is appreciation. When you express gratitude, it means you appreciate. Allah the Almighty is described as being grateful. Shakur. Shakur means he appreciates our deeds. And praise be to Allah who has removed sorrow from us. Indeed, our Lord is forgiving and appreciative. Forgiving of our mistakes, appreciative of our good deeds. It means he appreciates it. Well, when a person is appreciative, he is also grateful. What does human gratitude mean? Human gratitude means to use blessings according to the will of the giver, Allah. The Almighty gave you a blessing, right? You must use it according to the will of the giver, otherwise you would be ungrateful. You have two paths before you, either to be grateful or to be ungrateful. So if you want to be grateful, you must use every blessing that Allah Almighty has bestowed upon you according to the will of the giver, as Allah has commanded. For example, if Allah gives you a position, that is a blessing, right? So you are faced with one of two choices. Either you see it as a prize and distribute it among your friends, your associates, those who flatter you, appointing them to positions and so on. And unfortunately, this is what is common. When you deal with a position in this way, you become ungrateful, and some people... That's how it is. You ask, brother, why are you appointing... This person is a disaster for society. He tells you, brother, what should I do with him so he doesn't get upset? To keep him happy, make him your business manager. You'd refuse, fearing loss, yet you trust him with society. That's a betrayal of the nation. Betrayal isn't just siding with the enemy, this also betrays the nation, and sadly, it's common. Unfortunately, appointing incompetent people causes society to suffer and wastes the country's resources. That's why a position of authority is either seen as a prize or as a responsibility. If you see it as a responsibility, I will make this position a means for all that is good. Every project in the country, I must support and assist it, and every success in the country, I must support and encourage it so that it flourishes and grows. Because it is my responsibility, I was placed in this position to support everyone who wants to achieve success, everyone who wants to reach success. I am responsible as long as I am in this field. The essence of this blessing is that I should be a key to goodness and a lock against evil. When I have a position, when I have wealth and money, I must use them in ways that please Almighty God. What does that mean? There are projects that involve charitable work, and unfortunately, many businessmen are extremely attached to their money, even some of them who are elderly. Honestly, I don't understand the logic behind this philosophy. Being 70 or 80 years old and still clinging to your money when you have hundreds of millions. I have seen people like this. It's really strange. They would rather see their money as numbers in the bank than see it as happiness on people's faces or as projects that benefit others. Why is that? On the contrary, I swear, the greatest happiness a person can have is to see how their money has made people better, has improved our communities. It has led people to the path of goodness. What more do you need, my brother? It's enough for you to have what sustains you, enough for you to live comfortably. I'm not saying you shouldn't enjoy your wealth, but a lot of our money is just numbers in the bank. Honestly, for some people, even if he spent 1 million riyals every day, his money wouldn't run out before he died. And yet he clings to it. This is ingratitude. When you hoard your wealth, and wealth is a blessing from Allah Almighty, this is being ungrateful for that blessing. True gratitude is when you spend this blessing according to the will of Allah Almighty, and when you, even your mind is a blessing. Some people have incredible abilities in reasoning, analysis, and criticism. Look at how they invest it. Others have eloquence in their speech. See how they invest that. This is how you should raise a child. Imagine from a young age. And I know that every blessing must be invested in accordance with obedience to Allah Almighty. How would the equation change for me? Just by instilling the trait of gratitude. Imagine if, from the first grade all the way until graduating from university, they instilled in us the trait of gratitude. Leave aside all the other positive traits mentioned in the Qur'an. Just let me focus on gratitude and the negative traits. I think it's enough for me to just consider the idea of being withholding. When Allah Almighty spoke about the one who withholds, he said, withholder of good, transgressor, sinner. Notice how precise this phrase is. And in another verse he said, withholder of good, transgressor, doubter. The one who withholds good. Notice that the Qur'an always describes him as a transgressor.
It means he just withholds good.
He just withholds good, but it's actually aggressive. For example, if you're up for a job and someone asks me for a reference, but I withhold that good from you, he claims Faisal has issues and isn't suitable, making things up to damage your reputation. In the Quranic perspective, this is an act of aggression.
You're sinful for it.
That's why in the Qur'an, in Surah Al-Qalam, when the owners of the garden went off, whispering to each other, let no poor person enter it today, they said, don't let anyone in. They were preventing good from reaching people. Then, when their garden was burned, what did they say? They said, "Woe to us, we were indeed transgressors." A transgressor is someone who oversteps his own rights and infringes upon the rights of others. Do you see how it is? So when you prevent good, what happens? You are actually wronging people in this way. Some people think it's just a word. No. Nowadays, you find officials whose specialty is preventing good from reaching others. Officials whose only job is to act like a stick in the wheel. If they see a project moving forward, they'll obstruct it. Why? Because it's not their own project.
They feel like victims.
Sure. If it were mine, I'd support it. But since it's for other officials, I'll block it. It won't go forward.
But he doesn't do it intentionally out of malice. He does it out of fear. He does it because why? I mean, is there anyone...
This is not for good. No. Unfortunately, many people, if the success doesn't come through them, they stand against it. Either the success is in their name, or if not, they oppose it. And where is this compared to God's words and cooperate in righteousness and piety? On the contrary, if I see you succeeding in a project, I must cooperate with you, not just that I may, but that I must. If I am able to, I must support you. In this matter, while this person, because he prevents and blocks goodness, in the end becomes like a stick in the wheel. Wherever the wheel of goodness turns, he stops it.